All right, welcome everyone to our Mercury Retrograde webinar on Mercury Retrograde in Virgo. As you can see on your screen, Mercury is going to be retrograde from August 30th to September 21st or the 22nd if you live way east of here. Mercury is going to go retrograde at 29 Virgo and direct just past 15 degrees Virgo. As we typically do on these webinars, first of all, our housekeeping slides. You can learn with us through our free weekly audio podcast, through our Astro Library, and through our multimedia course. Here is a little more on the EAN Astro Library. It's a dozen plus years of materials by myself and other evolutionary astrologers through various live events and webinars. You see here you can subscribe for 1 month, 6 months, 12 months, or you can do a monthly recurring that you can cancel at any time. And right now for our Mercury Retrograde webinar, we're offering a 30% discount on any of the subscriptions. And you would want to enter the coupon code ASTROGUIDE, small letters, at the checkout. So you choose what you want first from this page right here, and then you enter again Astro Guide when you check out, and you can get that 30% off all the way through September 24th. So it goes a little past the Mercury direct. And here again, any of these, one section or all sections, however your time is, a total 30% off for you. In our multimedia course here, you can see we have 3 segments. Segments 1 and 2 are available with the binders and DVDs, or digital only, or both of them. You can peruse more information on our website if you would like to learn more. You can contact Media Monk at evolutionaryastrology.net, and you also see our phone, 605-348-5111 on your screen. So here is the dates that I would like you to put on your calendar for next year. We are in process of organizing our total solar eclipse event that will occur near the Black Hills here. We're going to combine it with lectures and sightseeing, and so half of it will be educational and half of it will be touring. We're going to visit our state park where you can see the buffalo. These pictures of the buffalo Leroy and I took last weekend as we were coming through the park. And we'll also look at Crazy Horse Memorial. You can see myself with 2 colleagues right there on the bottom of your screen. And of course this place was made well known by many of the Lakota or Sioux Native Americans, and probably one of our most famous ones has become Black Elk. And recently our highest peak, Harney Peak, was renamed to Black Elk Peak just in the last few weeks. So there are some of us who are quite excited to see that happen. And as you can see, one of his quotes on the screen, "Is not the sky a father and the earth a mother? And are not all living things with feet or wings or roots their children?" Black Elk is famous for having a vision come to him at the top of the peak, Black Elk Peak. And it's what really spurred him on as a spiritual leader in trying to see the interconnectedness of all beings on planet Earth. And so here we go. Mercury retrograde in Virgo, 29 to 15 degrees, August 30th through September 21st. So why do we look at planetary retrogrades in astrology? It's a geocentric or Earth-centered phenomena of apparent motion. Retrogrades are always more powerful because the planet is closest to Earth, no matter which planet it is, whenever it's retrograde. And these retrogrades cause a withdrawal from status quo to redefine any planetary archetype according to individual natural law. Now that status quo is going to give strong clues to the kinds of compensation any soul will make for each planetary archetype. And you'll find that status quo and the compensations via a planetary sign, house, aspects, the evolutionary state of consciousness within the soul, and of course all of the particular environmental conditionings that any soul comes through in a lifetime. Now that principle of psychological compensation is about being out of sync with your own true nature. And most of us have these psychological compensations in order to appear normal or like everyone else. These psychological compensations will take place anywhere there is a sense of dissatisfaction. And so when we have a planetary retrograde, it offers the opportunity to break free and align with one's own individual natural laws and principles. In other words, answers to retrograde lessons always come from within ourselves. A retrograde planetary archetype, whether it's natal or by transit, is non-static. It's in a perpetual state of evolving. Now the sign in the house of the retrograde planet will define how it's manifesting. The opposite sign in house will provide that clarity, balance, objectivity, expression, and answers to the planetary retrograde. Whenever you're looking at a transiting retrograde planet, it is always related back to the natal archetype in the chart by house, sign, aspects, etc. And anytime you have somebody who was born with Mercury retrograde, as we look at tonight's class, they will experience a temporary harmony during transiting Mercury retrograde because the transit of Mercury is their natal signature. Here's some visual for you with Mercury Astronomy. Mercury actually goes around the sun every 88 days. As it travels around along with planet Earth, it speeds up ahead of the sun and Earth falls down behind it. So it appears to take almost a year to go around the circle of the zodiac from our geocentric viewpoint. And this creates about 3 to 4 retrograde cycles per year. They last anywhere from 20 to 24 days. And Mercury's known to have a stationary period of 1 day, about 24 hours. Many of us like to say the day before, the day of, the day after, Mercury turning retrograde or direct is going to be some of the most intense. Now, because both Mercury and Earth are so close to the sun, you'll never see Mercury get further than 29 degrees away from it. And that is why whatever your sun sign is in your chart, Mercury is either going to be the sign before, the sign of, or the sign after your sun sign, because it's never more than this far away from the sun from our perspective. And for those of you who have some beautiful sunsets going on right now, you definitely want to be looking at that evening horizon to see Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter as evening planets. It's a beautiful time to be looking at them. You can also see Mars and Saturn with Antares further above if you'd like to look at those in the evening sky as well. Here's a visual of how it actually looks when Mercury goes retrograde. You can see it travels along, it enters the spot of its pre-shadow, which is where it's going to go direct. It moves through that. This is the 15 to 29 degrees Virgo. Here's Mercury going retrograde 29 Virgo, going all the way back to that 15 degrees to go direct. And then here is the post shadow where it travels again from 15 to 29 degrees Virgo and moves on. This is how it would visually look if you would actually map it against the heavens. Mercury retrograde patterns in general. Mercury's retrograde cycles reverse through the elements, water, air, earth, fire. Mercury will spend approximately 1 year's worth of retrogrades in one element, and then the next year it's going to transition from one element to the next. For example, 2016, Mercury retrograde started in air to earth. Then we had a Mercury retrograde in Earth Taurus. Now we've got Virgo, which is also an Earth sign. The next Mercury retrograde will be Capricorn to Sagittarius, Earth to Fire. Mercury is in Earth signs approximately half of the year in 2016. Can you see just how that in general, Mercury in Earth, is going to kind of slow down that element of communications? We're going to want the proof of the communications. We're going to be interested in the manifestations of things, the resources, or perhaps a little bit more with money as one of the resources. Mercury's going to be consumed with communicating about quote-unquote stuff, the earth, the physical manifestations. Next year, Mercury retrograde cycles are from earth to fire, and then they're going to finish up with the fire element towards the end of the year. The Mercury archetype, at this point, Mercury rules 2 archetypes. The outer side of Mercury, due to the active polarity, is known as Gemini in the 3rd house. This is where Gemini in the 3rd house is active, mutable air. This is the archetype of the conscious mind in the left brain. And this Gemini 3rd house archetype is how we classify the world, how we apply labels to facts, words, figures, etc. I'm wearing a headset. You're listening on your internet device. You may have a pen in your hand taking notes. Mercury, via Gemini in 3rd house, also rule all forms and devices of communications, speaking, writing, computers, phones, etc. This archetype is known as being debating, clever, versatile, the twins, excitable, the trickster, adaptable, talkative, argumentative, etc., etc. A lot of Mercury here with Gemini in the 3rd will be about understanding the relativity of truth, coming from that Sagittarius polarity. And Gemini in the 3rd is always going to expose any weak links on that path to understanding universal timeless truth. Now, the inner side of the Mercury archetype, known through the passive polarity, is Mercury's rulership of Virgo in the 6th house. This archetype is passive, mutable earth. It's still the archetype of the conscious mind in the left brain. But here, we start to get an ability to analyze, especially self-analysis. We can self-reflect, we adapt, we reason, we have reasoning capacities. We go beyond just classifications of words and labels, and we start to wonder how it all relates to everything else. It's also the archetype of self-improvement. It's also known to be the archetype, along with the polarity Pisces, of sadomasochism, which with our patriarchal conditionings is guilt linked to atonement or victimization, or guilt linked to anger or victorization. And when we start into this type of sadomasochistic distortions, we really bring up the issue of criticism, inner and outer, within ourselves and with others. We also know the origins of sadomasochism through patriarchal and religious distortions. This archetype, Virgo 6th house, nerves, worry, anxiety, self-doubt, procrastination, sometimes in its most essence, it's really about learning to be of service to another or society before we move on to the Libra 7th house, outer Venus rulership of that archetype. Now, Mercury retrogrades in general, it's about releasing excess thought. The mind is saturated. It gets hard to process information. We get confused and frustrated. It's hard to process through all the ideas in life. So Mercury retrograde, regardless of the archetype through sign or house, is to review and release worn out old mental patterns. It's about turning inward and quieting our mind. This means we learn to think for ourselves, and we learn to trust our intuition first and logic, Virgo, facts, Gemini second. Because what happens with Mercury retrograde is the left brain is pointing to the right brain. And this is because Mercury as ruler of Gemini, the polarity points to Sagittarius and ruler Jupiter. Mercury as ruler of Virgo, the polarity points to Pisces and Neptune. So what we have during any Mercury retrograde is a natural activation of the mutable quadrant. Again, quieting down the left brain and allowing the more intuitive right brain to have a say in prioritizing everything that mind is running around thinking, speaking, pondering all the time. So Mercury retrograde is finding quiet time in the busybodiness of retrograde overload. Any of you who've experienced some Mercury retrogrades can easily understand one of the most typical things Mercury retrograde is we go into overload with everything that we've got to do, with everything that ends up being done more than once, with being able to communicate clearly with people. Is that what you said? Here's what I think you said. What did you mean, honey? Finish that sentence, please. You stopped mid-sentence. In other words, all of us can recognize the detail overload with Mercury retrograde, including that electronic and technological world of Mercury retrograde. Those of you on our podcast last week heard Leroy and I talking. It took us about an hour. And let me see, Leroy was on 3 internet devices before we could get a clear enough connection to actually record our weekly podcast. So those details can also involve having to do something more than once to integrate, to evolve, and to then recognize, I don't need this anymore. Adios, goodbye. Sometimes we're forced to let it go. Sometimes we want to throw it away. It all just depends on what the details are for each of us. But Mercury retrograde gets busy because there's also this situation where we need to take the time to do it correctly or in the highest and best way possible. How many times are you going through a detail in your life and you go, oh, I'll clean that up tomorrow. Right now I'm just going to do it this way because it's the fastest way to do it. And with Mercury retrograde, it's not about the fastest. It's about the most thorough or complete way of doing it and cleaning it up as best as you can for all future times that you have to do any particular activity. Of course, Mercury retrograde is going to allow us to really gain that clarity on the best course of mental actions moving into the future. It's to help us create new attitudes, to create new processing patterns on how we look at life and work and relationships and everything that comes at us. Now, Mercury is moving through Virgo for 2 months. Whenever we have a Mercury retrograde, it ends up in a sign of the zodiac for almost 2 months, a little over 2 months, or it gets split up 2.5 months between 2 signs sometimes. But right here you can get a few of the visuals about Mercury in Virgo. Electronics, anyone? How well can you go through this retrograde and check out electronically? That archetype of Virgo serving. You can see this. You can see Virgo rules volunteerism as serving with others. And of course, Virgo in the 6th house is well known as a health and wellness archetype as well. So Mercury retrograde in Virgo is going to ask us to do some reviews with diet, exercise, and rest in general. How are you seeing this rising to the surface for you? By the way, a little detail. One of my favorite health and wellness websites is, I think it's drmercola.com. It's Jim Mercola, MERCOLA.com. Known about him for years. Several years ago, I started subscribing to his emails, and I got overload in my inbox, an email a day, and I just finally said, I can't stand this, I can't do it. So I went to unsubscribe, and in the process of unsubscribing, drmercola.com asked if I'd like all of the articles recapped and sent as one email a week. Click, yes, I'm in. I love it. I only get one email a week, and I can succinctly go to all of the nutrition articles, and so I like to share that little Mercury and Virgo detail with people when I work with them through health and wellness astrology, which I also do readings for. Here is the dates for this Mercury retrograde in Virgo. Conjunct the Sun, July 6th, 15 Cancer. Went into shadow August 11th. You can see 1449 Virgo. Mercury goes retrograde the 30th, 29 degrees Virgo. Here is the highlight, halfway point of the Mercury retrograde when it passes back over the Sun. Doesn't matter if it comes exactly halfway. It is the high point. This time, September 12th, and it will come at about 20.5 degrees Virgo. Here's Mercury going direct. Oh, I do have the 21st, 22nd here. It's 21st, 22nd, depending on where you are in the U.S. Europe, it's the 22nd. Here's where it goes direct again, and then here's that post shadow that we talked about. So with your arrows, here's the dates that you have 1, 2, 3, Mercury passes from 15 to 29 degrees Virgo. And then, of course, we start a brand new Mercury retrograde when it's direct. This is when it's on the far side of the Sun from Earth, October 22nd at about 5 degrees Scorpio. You see here on your screen. Now, Mercury retrograde in Virgo specifically, the detail overloads can create confusion, indecision, doubt, especially self-doubt, procrastinations, frustrations, all of the Virgo distortion words that we all may be familiar with. It can also include any Mercury retrograde, but Mercury retrograde in Virgo, when we're trying to get all those communications done via our smartphones and our emails and our texting and our Facebook and all that kind of stuff, we can have devices break down or quote-unquote die. We can have do-overs. We can have connection failures. Leroy and I also had our TV screen freeze up on us, and we spent about 24 hours trying to call the Geek Squad, going through the details of life, ignoring it, and then finally we said, you know, we really should figure this out, and we just found out we needed to unplug more things than we thought we did and let them reset and plug them back in, and TV worked just fine. The conscious mind here is going to be quick to see, this is Virgo, cup half empty, cup half full. What isn't working? What is wrong? So in other words, that self-analysis will really intensify with whatever we're going through. If it's the second house, it can be resources. You will be analyzing your values. If Mercury's retrograde Virgo in the 7th house, you're going to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on some of these relationships. And it's not working, but 7th house, oh, maybe I should try again and I shouldn't judge it. You know, if Mercury's retrograde in the 10th house in Virgo, you know, this is going to be something about career, something about the accumulation of resources, something with the authoritarian parent. We'll be running up against things that aren't working with that parent, or we're really going to be analyzing ourselves if we're the parent and have children. So you can see whatever house Mercury retrograde in Virgo is transiting through, we're going to be seeing the cup half empty. And we're going to need to look for how to make that cup half full. How do we self-improve what's not working? Now, because Virgo is an earth sign, it is definitely going to still relate to resources, money, and finances. And this is going to include work and career. And Virgo is always the day-to-day workload, getting the details done in our normal work routine, whatever that is on an hour-to-hour or day-to-day basis. Mercury retrograde in Virgo, we're going to see more on this later, is making waning trines to Pluto in Capricorn. And so the same thing as with Mercury in retrograde in Taurus. There will be some issues around not wanting to let go of the resource control and or possibly hoarding or being in charge of those details, and where is it just going to be maybe wiped out from underneath us. It's not always a negative, though. We can have resources lost or gained. Mercury retrograde in Virgo waning trines to Pluto. We can have resource rewards. It will depend, though, when we're dealing with trines, waning trines, on what our prior efforts and karma has been around the issue of resources, money, and finances. With the Mercury retrograde in Virgo, of course, we're going to see sadomasochistic patterns exposed. Basically, we have two extremes. We have that sense of I need to atone. I have to amend. I have to make good. It's the victimization pattern. It's the masochist. And what we're going to need with this retrograde is healthy boundaries and learning to actually say no. No, you don't get to abuse me or use me or run around me. This retrograde moving us towards Virgo is about healthy boundaries and equality. And what are we going to have with the victimization pattern? Self-love through imperfections. Virgo is imperfection. Pisces polarity, potential for perfection. Though we don't pray ourselves perfect as we've been led to believe through the religious distortions and patriarchal conditionings. You might see these types of things coming up in the news in all their many forms through this Mercury retrograde time period. If we swing towards the anger or victor pattern of the sadomasochism, this is the sadist. This is get them before they get me. And so there may be circumstances during this retrograde that can force us to adjust our attitudes. Here's where the self-analysis could really come in handy. Donald Trump. And it may force us to change our behaviors. I mean, self-improvement, Virgo, it's emphasized. We still need self-love here because through both the atonement and the anger side of sadomasochism, it still boils down to self-worth around love and being able to love oneself, to self-love through the imperfection, through the anger, through any sense of injustice, whether it's real or imagined. Self-love, unconditional love, Pisces polarity is going to be the solution. It's going to be the direction. It's going to be the sparks of insight we're looking for. Typically, we might see Mercury retrograde in Virgo bring about the tendency to tear down. Again, easy to see what's wrong. So we can, that inner outer criticism, we want to tear down another person, another point of view, following politics, anybody, or a belief, Pisces polarity. So what we're going to have to do is review inner criticism and outer criticism. Can you take a deep breath and count to 10 before you lash out? Can you take a deep breath and count to 10 and understand what's triggering you that's making you want to lash out in frustration? We will have necessary communications in order to understand another person's perspective and their point of view. Can you see consensus Mercury retrograde in Virgo and the intensity of what will go on in the U.S. in the presidential election? Each candidate tearing this one down, tearing that one down. Who can get past tearing someone else down and actually say, here's my solution. Here's what I think we can do moving forward as a whole. Stay tuned. Watch this. I think the first presidential debate comes right after Mercury turns direct. I think it's late in the month, if I've got it correctly, if I remember correctly. Mercury retrograde and Virgo are also going to bring about any necessary experiences of humiliation in order to move towards equality, which is Libra. In other words, we know Leo as being on top of the pyramid, and we've got to burst that Leonian bubble of self-importance. Virgo turns the pyramid upside down, puts itself on the bottom. So if we're running around with too much self-importance, there will be inner and outer situations that will bring about a natural humiliation and understanding humility in order to recognize that everyone is important as us. So if we're on the atonement victim side, got to stand up for ourselves. If we're on the anger victor side, we have to realize others are just as important as us. A big theme, Mercury retrograde in Virgo, is service. Service to self, self-improvement, to another person or people in our life, to our family, co-workers, community, political leaders, the environment, Gaia, all other species, be they animal or plants, because healthy Virgo is very gentle and self-loving. So how can we go about doing that during this retrograde as we quiet down, as we try to get out in nature, as we quiet the mind? How can we love ourselves? How can we be gentle with ourselves? How can we expand upon the self-improvement that's highest and best for us? Coming at the end of Jupiter's year-long cycle in Virgo, we're going to come up with new ways to improve our diet, to improve exercise, and to improve rest, that Pisces polarity. And take a pause for a drink for just a moment. Speaking of honoring that diet, exercise, and rest, I'm on a little bit of a roll here talking. So when Mercury's retrograde in Virgo, we have a Pisces polarity. And so the essence here is making the effort to simplify our life. Virgo can overwhelm and overcomplicate so well with this detail and that detail and another detail and another detail, and the details never end. And the Pisces polarity is just taking a deep breath and just, what's really important here? And to learn how to prioritize what's important. If I'm not healthy, I'm not any good to anybody else. And if I'm not being loving and gentle with my world and those that I care about the most, how do I expect the same to come back to me? And probably even more important is finding that quiet time to actually hear what universal source is saying to us. Remember, Mercury retrograde in general, left brain to right brain. Mercury retrograde in Pisces emphasizes moving over to the right brain and filling in the big picture. The whole is greater than the parts that make it up. And then that's what allows us to make sense, prioritize, the Virgo details and to know which ones we can just let go of and throw out the window. It's possible that we can easily have religious and spiritual breakthroughs with Mercury Retrograde Virgo Pisces polarity. Make the effort, Virgo, in that area. If you live in the westernized world, you can realize that everyone goes around overly stressed with Mercury retrograde in Virgo. And everyone wants to feel safe, secure, and love. Almost all souls are going to want inner peace, outer peace. Can we stop, take a few deep breaths, and just visualize that, and breathe it in with this Pisces polarity? Can we recognize that there's many paths home and there's many ways to get to wherever it is we want to go on planet Earth? Pisces, rest your weary soul. One of the ways that we can do this with the Pisces polarity is to have interaction with all aspects of nature, to actually get out in nature, breathe, walk barefoot in the ground, grounding, lay down on planet Earth, walk on the sand, get your feet on the water, in the water. Hey, if you can walk on water, more power to you. Go for that hike or just sit out in nature. It's also about interacting with all species, the animal, the plant, the mineral, all the other kingdoms. And through that interaction, allowing ourselves to relax, to breathe, to feel that connection to everything else on the deepest levels possible. Not to mention feeling that deep connection to source energy as well. For those of you who are not familiar with this from Facebook or our weekly podcast, this year on Leroy's birthday, he turned 60 on August 12th. One more happy solar return, honey. And for his birthday, we got a kitten. We have a new little black and white, and our black and white, Mr. T, who was with us for 15 years, 16, I can't remember. Oh, I'm losing track of it now. 15 years. My Scorpio says, yeah, sure, he's the reincarnation. But I've had 2 weeks now to just observe this little one, and I'm like, OMG. Talk about being a life renewal for us. And just kind of watching some of the little quirks that Mr. T had that our new little friend Rocky has. He's been very life-affirming for us and for big brother LB Loverboy, our 16-year-old tabby-colored Manx, who we've decided we're not calling him Grandpa Kitty anymore. He's now older brother instead of baby brother, and even he has become more active. So just that, again, renewal with natural law will come simply through going outside. Calm down the Virgo and allow the Piscean deep intuition to come through. We also then, working towards this Pisces polarity, can search for a common language that we can actually speak to one another with, and for a common emotional connection. We were visiting Leroy's parents last weekend, and of course, we're all over the place politically. You can't have a conversation with my mother-in-law without it leading to politics. And she made a really good point. You know, she's in her early 80s, and she says, you know what, I was brought up that you pray for your president regardless of his political party. And I want you kids to do that as well. I don't care whether it's a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. I want you to pray for your president so he can guide the country as best as he can. But I thought about that, and I thought, you know, that's taking that step back. And instead of criticizing what you don't like about a presidential candidate, or your leader of your country or your city or your state or province, can you wish them well? Can you wish them unconditional love and finding their way through life, through the universe? This is what we can do to anybody in our life with the Pisces polarity. So again, it's recognizing that the Pisces polarity is the potential for perfection, and the path to getting there is the Virgo, one foot in front of the other. Practice, practice, practice. And when we can step away from the busybodiness and tap into that larger picture through the Pisces polarity, then we're going to know which way is best for us. And we'll take our own path of improving and evolving and perfecting here on planet Earth. Now, moving into the aspects with Mercury Retrograde. Mercury always moves so fast. It is always active or aspecting several planets during its retrograde cycles. And evolutionary astrology utilizes the 360-degree cycle of aspects, phases and aspects to recognize how active Mercury really is during any retrograde cycle. Here's a visual of you for visual of this for you, going from 0, 45, 90, 135, 180, 225, 270, 315 to 360. The 360 cycle of phases and aspects. And you always compare the faster moving planet to the slower moving planet. We'll look at this visually with some specifics here for Mercury retrograde. But here's the list of the aspects. And all aspects listed are 3 times each, except for Venus. Even though there's 3 Venus aspects, there's 3 different ones. And so Mercury, waning squares to Mars, waning trines to Pluto, oppositions to Chiron, waxing inconjuncts to Uranus, conjunctions to Jupiter, and conjunct and waning semi-sextiles, semi-squares to Venus. We're going to go over all of these in detail. And the last slide has the dates and aspects in chronological order for you. Here's Mercury turning stationary retrograde. I always do it for where I live in Rapid City, South Dakota. I always use 0 Aries houses so we can see this in the natural zodiac, because we're all going to have different ascendants across the planet. You can see right here that we're going to have an eclipse of the sun 2 days after Mercury goes retrograde at 9.5 degrees Virgo. You can see here's the aspects I drew them for you. Mercury is going to have 3 conjunctions to Jupiter. Venus is going to conjunct it, just has, and it's going to pull ahead then, and that's why Mercury is going to be waning to Venus, because Venus is ahead. Venus is slower moving. Even though you never see them opposite each other in a natal chart, you'd start with Venus and go all the way around the circle to get to Mercury, waning aspects. Here's the waning squares to Mars, waning trines to Pluto, oppositions to Chiron, and starting with Uranus, the waxing inconjuncts that Mercury will make to Uranus. Here is the interior conjunction, again, the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde cycle. This is again going to be September 12th. They will have their, it's called an interior conjunction, 20.5 degrees Virgo. Mercury retrograde passing back over the sun. Look at how active the second aspects during the retrograde are. The 9th, the inconjunct or quincunx to Uranus, opposition to Chiron on the 10th, the conjunction to the sun and the last quarter square to Mars, and Venus will have pulled 30 degrees ahead of Mercury, and so the waning semi-sextile on the 14th, followed then by a lunar eclipse on the 16th at 24.5 degrees Virgo Pisces. You see the sun moving in here, moon will move around to be conjuncting Uranus as they have the lunar eclipse. So just know these dates right here, quite active for the Mercury retrograde cycle. Lots of aha moments coming through, perhaps the potential for a lot of frustrations, upsets, things maybe not working right, to get us to slow down, pay attention to that Pisces polarity going on. Now, here's the aspects that Mercury makes to Venus, and I've included both waning semi-squares. Mercury is going to be behind Venus until the next Venus retrograde, which is next spring, March, April of 2017 in Aries. I don't remember exact dates or degrees, but I know the next Mercury retrograde is in Aries. And when it goes retrograde, then, or Venus retrograde will be in Aries. And when Venus goes retrograde in Aries, Mercury will pass in front of it. So Mercury's waning to Venus this retrograde cycle and the next one, December, January in Capricorn, Sag. So this is the conscious mind, Mercury, and its values, Venus. And Venus, as you hear me say this if you listen to all of these free Mercury retrograde webinars, they're always an aspect. It's just how many of them are they going to make? And they will range between 0 to 45 degrees, the semi-square. When Mercury's behind Venus, Mercury is always processing and making sense of the evolving values, because Venus is racing ahead of Mercury. And so Venus ahead of Mercury, it's always forcing that conscious mind to support our needs and wants with whatever Venus feels is important. And then you can see as Venus moves into its retrograde, it all gets thrown up in the air, and they're both reviewing values and needs and how we're going to process through and communicate all that. This particular Mercury retrograde, the sign transits in Virgo and the last one in Libra, and Venus in these signs as it aspects Mercury, it's going to continue to point a focus upon relationships. It's going to finish up the Mars retrograde in Sag Scorpio. More on this next slide. Jupiter is going to go into Libra and then Scorpio for the next 2 years. You thought we were done with relationships with the Mars retrograde? Nuh-uh. We're really going to have a focus on Jupiter and Libra here and focus on relationships for the next 2 years. So Mercury is going to be reviewing how it wants to move forward in all of its many relationships. Virgo is that inner adjustment from self to others. Leo to Libra. So we're going to be prioritizing values, Venus, beliefs, the Pisces polarity. We're going to be prioritizing people we want in our life. Could include some hellos, goodbyes. And there's going to be the evolution of any relating goals and patterns, how we go about communicating them, what we want from all of that. So we're moving into Mercury retrogrades in the second half of the zodiac. So that in itself is also going to be having us concentrating on the whole realm of relationships. So Mercury is going to have 3 last quarter squares to Mars. So here's one last review from the Mars retrograde of this summer. And that last quarter square, what is no longer working in our life, in our career, in our relationships. Mars is going to be in these 3 signs as it makes these aspects, these 3 last quarter squares to Mercury. More emphasis of relationships. Well, we could find typically arguments, communication mix-up, with those people who have differing beliefs, attitudes, and goals. Can you see frustration? Mercury, Mars, why isn't working this way? Why doesn't it work anymore? And what it's going to just really behoove us with this Piscean polarity to find a common ground with other people. In other words, frustrations are going to arise because the details in life, Mercury retrograde Virgo, are going to require more effort than Mars wants to provide. And so we're really going to have to make that effort to slow Mars down and work with Mercury. So both our attitudes, Mercury, and action, Mars, have to change, need to metamorphose. Last quarter square is the crises in consciousness. And so the frustration will be doing that same thing over and over and over again and wanting different results. What do we need to change? What do we need to do differently? And it can also be wanting everyone else, relationships, to change while we stay secure within ourselves. So we must change as much as we want everyone else to. So we are also going to be continuing to review the desires, Mars, that we are wanting to implement at the end of its retrograde cycle, 2016. What was it, 9 Sag to 23 Scorpio? Mars has had the conjunction with Saturn, August 24th at about 10 degrees. It's going to also have a conjunction with Pluto at about 15 degrees on October 19th. These will be two big aspects, these conjunctions, in moving forward with the desired nature. But right now, with 3 last quarter squares, can you see the review of actions? It is about moving forward, but only if we are pondering and adjusting how we are moving forward at the same time. Mercury is going to have 3 conjunctions to Jupiter, 2 of them in Virgo and 1 in Libra. And when these two meet, Mercury left brain, Jupiter right brain, there is a blending, a coming together, a synergy that needs to happen. There is a death and rebirth of communications. Left brain must surrender to right brain when these two conjunct. Jupiter, the slower moving cycle, will have the last word with the faster moving Mercury. Now typically this Mercury retrograde in Virgo is going to want the proof, and Pisces polarity is going to ask for faith. So we're going to have to come up with some way of trusting our place in life and our process in life while making a sincere effort to self-improve again, no matter how many times it takes. These two coming together with 3 conjunctions will ask us to initiate new communication attitudes and styles. Jupiter right brain rules overall language. Mercury left brain rules the words. So how do we take a language and speak it clearly enough? Old mental patterns to let go of, you need to fill it up with the effort to create new ones. It also is emphasizing the finishing up of Jupiter's transit through Virgo. So Mercury retrograde here is going to say, okay, what's left to clean up? What am I supposed to figure out and recognize? Pisces polarity. How do I serve? How do I clean up? How do I start again this Virgo self-improvement process? How am I really grounding it so that I can move forward and really make use of everything that I've learned through Jupiter's year-long transit through Virgo. Just take a moment and think. What have you procrastinated in the last year? What have you put off for another day? Here's the emphasis. So start again or start afresh. And that includes diet, exercise, and rest, as well as work, as well as relationships. And this then, oh, forgot to put this slide in. I just wanted to let you know that Jupiter is going to be in Libra September 9th through October 10th of 2017, and we're going to have a two-part series on Jupiter and Libra. September 12th, we're going to look at the archetype of Jupiter and Libra, and September 19th, we're going to look at Jupiter and Libra through each of the 12 houses. So stay tuned, subscribe to our email newsletter if you would like to register for this two-part series on Jupiter in Libra.
Or just find that forecasting webinars page on our website and you can get your enrollment right there and your registration link and the confirmation email.
Thank you, honey.
And yes, if anybody on this call is not on our Astro News list, you know, we do send out a notice of our weekly podcast and lots of other information. And you'll also be included in some of those event newsletters that go out, including Jupiter and Libra coming up September 12th and the 19th.
All right. This is going to be balanced. The Mercury-Jupiter conjunctions then are also going to be taking into consideration Mercury's oppositions to Chiron in Pisces. And what we can have here is it can be quite easy to get caught up in any sense of victimization and or powerlessness. It can have us wanting to check out, escape, daydream, fantasize. I just want to go do the Piscean float. I don't know if I can make the effort that I need to make here. My Leroy says, coulda, shoulda, woulda, oughta, gotta, blah, blah. Forget it. So it becomes very important here with these Mercury-Chiron oppositions that we throw off any old self-defeating patterns possible. This is really healing this sense of victimization, stepping into a sense of power and co-creating with the universe. It also, as Chiron finishes up in Chiron, it'll be there another year, 2 years. It goes into Aries 2018. This is where we want to revisit and re-energize a relationship with Divine Source. And as we do that, it allows us then to honor the divine in everyone else as we find those healthy boundaries of equality here. So you're either going to drop down into that victimization or get pissed off and angry and decide to go overboard that way. We can have the masochist or the sadist here. And if we can develop, if we can take that relationship to the divine, the next step, then we can become those healers. Chiron in Pisces is just, you know, whooshing upon us and energizing within us as much as it possibly can. We can be part of the solution, not the problem. Now, Mercury also makes waxing in conjuncts to Uranus, 150-degree mark, the inner adjustment. It is the Virgo aspect, so to speak. And so this Mercury retrograde in Virgo, We can have insecurity and crises around moving forward in our life. Here's where that good old self-doubt, the excuses, the procrastinations, all of those Virgo words can build up and build up. And sooner or later, the Uranus and Aries pressure is going to force us to move forward. Doesn't matter whether you're finished or you feel ready or you got the degree or you finished up this or that or whatever. You're having to make those inner adjustments and then move forward. Inner adjustment, move forward. And what we can get caught up in is judging everyone else or blaming others if we're not willing to do that self-analysis. If we're not willing to look in the mirror at ourselves, it's always going to be them out there. It's going to be our life circumstances. It's going to be the job. It's going to be the situation. It's going to be whatever, blah, 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 blah. Well, Pisces polarity to this retrograde, if it's in our world, we've co-created it. So how do we co-create it differently? There can be pressure building up with communications. The upsets, the explosions, the anger, raging at another. And if this comes through, then can you quiet down and really check out, why am I so frustrated? I want to blame the other person. I want to blame life. I want to blame circumstances. But what is it about me that I need to quiet down and listen? Inwardly, can I listen outwardly? Uranus in Aries, we won't have any trouble drawing in someone who, more than one, who is more than willing to give us an opinion on what it is we need to do differently. Can we quiet down? Inwardly, outwardly listen, and then move forward. Uranus in Aries, you can pay attention to the element of repetition, saying, do this, do this, do this. Mercury makes those 3 waning trines that we talked about briefly to Pluto in Capricorn. So there can be, this is a waning trine, so it's outer rewards or outer upsets. And it's all, because it's a trine, it's all based upon the prior efforts made. Mercury's done 2/3 of its annual cycle with Pluto the Soul. So is things coming together, or are they falling apart? And how do you make the effort accordingly? Because it is the waning trine, there is excellent timing and potential for communications, especially around any resources, work, career, having the conversations back and forth, coworker to coworker, owner to owner, employee to employer, employer to employee, whatever the way it goes. Make the effort to communicate here. This is one of the smoother aspects. And by all means, Mercury retrograde in Virgo, take time to try and understand where someone else is coming from and see if both can make adjustments however necessary. Waning trines, it could be quite easy. We're in the middle degrees of Pluto in Capricorn, and those in control do not want to let go. So there can be control games, the good old resource manipulations, the good old battles between haves and have-nots, and subtle manipulations. Maybe not so subtle, maybe overt manipulations because of the trine, trying to hold on. So we really can make change easily here, or we can resist it and stay stuck in the same old resource shortages, upsets, etc., whatever. Now, it so happens that this Mercury retrograde would be really strong for the Pluto in Virgo generation, those born between 1964 to 1972. You're going to get one or more likely 3 Mercury conjunctions over natal Pluto. And so you're going to have an intense self-analysis around what is not working in your life. Mercury retrograde in Virgo is going to turn that eagle eye to the depth of the soul. Where are you procrastinating, making excuses? Where are you making the effort? So when it does this, we can have major mental ahas and understandings that will pop up into consciousness. And as this happens, it becomes necessary then to change our mental perspectives, to change our self-talk, to change our communication efforts and processes with anybody else in our world. We could find work crises surface that can affect our sense of security and resources. And if this is the case, what are the adjustments that we need to make? What are the self-responsibilities we need to take? What are the actions and changes required of us? Doesn't mean guarantee work crisis. We could also have some work and communication rewards, especially Pluto and Virgo generation. We've been around for a little while. We've been through the Pluto and Sag squares. We've got Pluto and Capricorn waxing trine to natal Pluto Virgo. We definitely could have some potential for rewards that come through. Here's Mercury stationary direct. This will happen again September 21st, 22nd, depending on where you are. Mercury going direct at this 1449. Look at how it comes within orb of conjunction north node, opposition south node, orb of opposing Neptune, retrograde Pisces, orb of last quarter square to Saturn and Sag. Oh, and when Mercury turns stationary direct, look where the moon is. We have a grand cross in the mutable quadrant when Mercury goes direct. It could be a very, very busy time. And right before that, well, Mercury goes direct with an orb of the degree conjuncting where the solar eclipse was on the 1st. And just before Mercury goes direct, 21st, 22nd, here's the lunar eclipse, September 16th, 24.5 degrees Virgo Pisces. So the eclipse season is very active with this Mercury retrograde and vice versa. This Virgo Pisces polarity is emphasized through Mercury retrograde and the eclipses. Now, here's where Mercury actually made its one last quarter square, its opposition to Neptune, last quarter square Saturn, and its conjunction to the North Node. So as I showed you in the slide before, these aspects all come into play again when Mercury goes direct. It's the spiritual T-square, as we've been talking. Jupiter, Virgo, Saturn, Sag, Neptune, Chiron, Pisces, and the nodal axis, Virgo, Pisces. It boils down to excluding versus including. See that played out on our political stage in the U.S., but it's happening all over. It applies to every area of life, from the most intimate and personal to the broadest collectives. Now, because of that moon in Gemini activating that grand square in the mutable quadrant, there can be a lot of emotional triggers going on Mercury direct. You want to drive, move safely, drive defensively, being aware of others. You want to make an effort to speak as calmly and honestly as you can with clear intent. And you want to trust your intuition and trust your gut through all of the mutability and mobility and chaos and busyness of Mercury stationary direct, and especially with this Grand Cross. And of course, Mercury stationary direct. You want to be making that effort to let it go and move forward. Include as much as you can with healthy boundaries. And you have the right to exclude and leave behind wherever it is unhealthy for you. A few more charts for you. Here's the Gemini rising chart that I use. It's the one that takes place at 2:13 a.m. in the morning on July 4th in Philadelphia. Mercury is down here, quite active in the U.S. chart. It has waning in conjuncts to the moon, which is the public. So there are public outer adjustments and faith issues, the good old truth versus lies that'll be going on throughout this Mercury retrograde. It will almost be like both political parties, who can expose the most lies of the other side. The waxing sextiles that Mercury will make to itself. The waxing squares that Mercury will make to Mars. This is compliments of Leroy. I didn't recognize this one, but he's very familiar with this. The plan ahead that I showed earlier, always plan ahead. Mercury, Mars can be quite impulsive, and then they start moving forward and go, oh, wait a minute, I didn't think of this. I didn't allow enough room with my characters to get them all in there. We can find this going on a collective level as well. Could we have more transportation upsets and disasters? Hopefully not. Maybe we'll have some breakthroughs. There was a huge major funding to the Amtrak train system here lately, so maybe Amtrak will get those automatic stops in their train systems like we already have in Europe and other places around the world. Mercury's going to make 3 conjunctions to Neptune. Here's going to be the political confusion, and I don't know quite who to believe. And it's really going to ask us to go over here and try and be objective. Let's see how that goes. It's going to make 3 waning trines to the natal Pluto in the U.S. chart. This could be more shenanigans financially and with resources. Maybe there could be some political truce that might come out in regards to this. Stay tuned, we'll see. But Mercury retrograde is pretty active with aspecting half of the planets during this retrograde cycle. Here's Donald Trump's chart. Mercury's active for him. He has the South Node in Sag conjunct Gemini with the North Node, or South Node in Sag conjunct Moon in Sag. Opposite, North Node Gemini conjunct Uranus and Sun. Mercury's going to be squaring all of this. So he's going to continue to have his communication issues. He's going to continue to have his own adjustments that he's going to be making. And he's going to continue to have the whole truth versus lies thing exposed for him as well. Here's Hillary's chart. And there is a lot of speculation and debate. Virgo. Around astrologers, is Hillary's time 8:02 a.m. or 8:02 p.m. October 26, 1947 in Chicago. I tend to use the AM chart. It gives her a 9th house Pluto. This is the truth versus lies thing in her own chart. It puts the moon in Pisces in the 4th. Here's the emotional sensitivity and secrecy. and holding those closest to her close. Here's more of the secrecy with the Scorpio and the whole power behind the scenes, things that go on for her. The Scorpio rising with the South Node just inside the Ascendant, and all of the power struggle upsets that tend to go on in her world. Now here's where Mercury will be retrograde in this chart. Mercury's going to oppose her moon. It's going to square her Uranus. Here's going to be the public trust and the truth versus lies. Both candidates are going to be going through with this. Now, if you ask me if I had to predict, and I don't like that word, the presidential election, if enough people show up to vote, Hillary will be our next president. I can see the faction in this country that is really conservative, right-wing, prejudiced, racist, religiously judgmental. They're not the majority. And if the majority shows up, I do think that it will probably be Hillary's election, because Trump just doesn't have a policy. And as many have said, with this Mars conjunction smack dab before this ascendant, he just does not have the temperament for a president. He does not have the communication abilities here. 2955 Leo, and a Mercury retrograde in the first house going into the second in Virgo. Talk about self-adjustments with this square forced into it. You already see it now with the words to backtracking on the whole immigration thing. Build a wall, Mexico's going to pay for it, and all 11 million have to be deported and come back in. So if he sticks with that, he's got his conservative base, but he doesn't have women, minorities, the moderate Republicans, anybody who's educated and has a sense of Virgo abilities to extrapolate his personality on the main stage. And so, again, I don't know that Hillary's the perfect candidate. I do think that there's been some lies and or secrecy, but I also think that she's been quite supportive of women and children. And I do think that she will be, I read a very good article, I think Patricia Walsh was forwarding it on Facebook, if I remember correctly, how there's a lot of analysis that she puts into all positions to really try and come forward with a consensus on it. Just not necessarily the natural speaker like her husband is. More of the secretive, I'm forced onto the stage, and who knows what she's done in the past. That is forcing a whole, come to Jesus moment with honesty. So just a little bit of my opinions here on the election cycle, because I figured you guys would want to know my opinion. Virgo, right? Get out to vote and encourage everybody that you can to vote, because Hillary will definitely introduce more progressive Supreme Court justices than Trump. Mercury retrograde in Virgo, here's my closing thoughts. How do I prioritize the activity in my life? How do I quiet my mind and relax? How do I energize my connection to Source? Where do I need to trust my intuition? What are the necessary changes in my life? How do I treat myself better? How do I unconditionally love myself and others? All right, so this is my material for the Mercury retrograde. I am going, oh, here's our future Mercury retrogrades. Our next webinar will be December 12th, always at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Mercury's next retrograde, December 19th to January 8th, 15 Cap to 29 Sag. And you see the next 3 Mercury retrogrades that are coming. And yes, of course, our total solar eclipse is going to come during a Mercury retrograde. The total solar eclipse is going to occur at 29 degrees Leo on August 21st. Mercury's going to go direct on that solar eclipse. Here is our save the date again. And so end of my slides other than 2 more. So I'd like to take a moment here and check in with Leroy and see if I may have any questions from anybody coming through. Oh, one more thing. I came across this and I just had to put it in here. I want to tell all the Sun and Virgos happy birthday. And if you can see this, may you get as much praise and attention on your birthday as an average millennial feels entitled to every day. I just had to laugh. And I'm sorry, millennials, I do not mean any criticism or judgment or put down. It's a joke. And I just thought it was just a funny little joke. Here's the dates again, September 12th and September 19th for Jupiter and Libra. And of course, here are all the Mercury retrograde dates that we talked about in chronological order. Leroy, comments, questions from anybody?
Yeah, don't try to write any of this down because everybody on this call is going to get a recording. We're going to send out the PDF of all these slides that are very printable on your computer/printers, and also all the audio and video links will be on the first page of that PDF. So no worries about getting all these details. But go back a couple slides, Kim, to that solar eclipse event we're planning August of next year. That 28 and change Leo, that's our composite.
The total, yes, Media Monk. Sorry, Leroy. Yes, the total solar eclipse is going to be 2853 Leo.
And our composite Pluto?
Your Pluto is 2819 Leo.
2819, yeah.
And our composite Pluto between you and me is 2947 Leo. So we're going to have a total solar eclipse, and my Pluto is 2 degrees Virgo. So the solar eclipse is going to be smack dab on our composite Pluto and within orb of both of our natal Plutos.
Mm-hmm. Kind of an auspicious time to... Yeah, we're really looking forward to this experience. It should be a real nice time. I hope everybody will save the date and more information to come.
Yes, I'm right now finalizing speakers and outline how we're looking at it. We're going to have a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday event, Friday lectures, Saturday touring, Sunday lectures, Monday touring to the total eclipse and another event on with that. We do also have a location. We have a very beautiful remodeled Holiday Inn downtown. Any of you who've ever been to Norwalk, it's the same type of a hotel with the big aquarium and the water feature running down one side of atrium, right?
Atrium, yes.
Atrium.
Waterfall in the atrium, yep.
and you have 10-15 miles of hiking trails a couple of blocks away. You're 2 blocks from downtown, and gosh, 30-40 restaurants, health food store, pubs, clubs, you name it. We'll be putting things together. Real good room rate. $135 for a double plus $15 for breakfast. So for $75 with roommate, you have your room and breakfast. So stay tuned. We'll release the details with Mercury Direct come mid-September, and you can start registering and getting your room at that point. And as you, again, this is a sunset from our backyard, and this is my back deck with another sunset looking off. And what I am wanting to do on the Monday, the solar eclipse is going to be at 11:30 in the morning. And then what we're wanting to do is, I think we were planning to bring people back through Crazy Horse. Absolutely gorgeous. Us 3 girls were in tears when I took 2 colleagues, Joanne and Mariana, there in July. I hadn't been there in a few years, and just amazing to see. And then that evening after the eclipse, I'd like to have a picnic in our backyard, because those of you who know the podcast, we live on this gorgeous, gorgeous acre and a half, and I'm a gardener, and I had a friend call our place Arboretum a couple of weeks ago. This is one of the flowers, Augustaceae, in bloom that are all over my yard at the time of the eclipse. This was us last 2 weekends ago, coming home from our friends. Had to stop the vehicle to let the buffalo cross over. And here was one on the other side of the road, as well as the pronghorn. This is a male, if you can see the horns, and he was surrounded by a half a dozen females. Of course, this is the side view of Crazy Horse. I always like this view. I think we'll have a drive-by of Mount Rushmore because we're wanting to make it more Native American, indigenous experience through Custer State Park with all of the animals, and then through Crazy Horse with everything that they are doing in carving the statue of Crazy Horse. You see a picture of it in the background here, as well as their museum, their gift shop, and the Native American University of North America that they are also in process of creating. Everything about Crazy Horse is privately funded. It is all being done by the public wanting to create this place of honoring the ancestry of Native Americans.
I think we wanted to set it up where we're honoring all of our great leaders and all of our relations, whether they are Lakota Sioux or, you know, our famous presidents, as you see there in the picture. But interesting little side note, Black Elk and Crazy Horse were actually cousins.
Second cousins.
In our famous second cousins in our famous Lakota history around the Black Hills. So we're going to explore that side of it, and not to deny any of our association with our famous presidents on Mount Rushmore.
When you're in downtown Rapid City, again, the hotel is 2 blocks from our downtown stretch with all of the shopping and dining, etc. But what Rapid has done is on every street corner there is a bronze statue of the presidents. So you can actually, I think they've got 40 of 44 done, okay? I don't think they're all done. We don't have Obama up yet, and I don't know if the Bushes are up yet. I don't remember seeing Obama or Clinton or the Bushes. You could correct me, Leroy. We'll have that detail figured out. However, you can walk up and down the 2 main streets and see each president their name, the date they were presidents. There's a walking tour if you want to do the phone app. So if you want to do the traditional thing, it's right there. So you've got the two-leggeds of multiple races plus all the four-leggeds. Any questions on Mercury retrograde in Virgo, anyone? Other than taking the time to really calm yourself down, prioritize the details, breathe deep, reconnect with Source as best as you can through nature.
Nope, we're clear on the board, Kim. Nice job. Everybody's giving you some kudos on the Q&A panel, so thanks for the effort.
Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Mercury retrograde in Virgo. We'll see you on the weekly podcast, and all the best to you in the next month. Thanks again for listening, everyone.